Now, I think that we've alluded to a point here that I want to try to be sure that we make much more explicit before we leave this subject, and that is what happened when God cursed the ground in Genesis 3:17. Let me just read that verse real quick here. To Adam he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and it will eat the plants of the field." Now, specifically, I want to hone in on this phrase, "cursed is the ground because of you," because that seems to sound like, to many Christians, that there was a systemic change in the ground or the laws of physics from a scientific standpoint at this point in time. How, if you're taking the position here that the laws of physics have stayed the same since the creation of the universe, how do you explain Genesis 3:17?
Well, note that the text isn't saying cursed is the ground because I've changed the physical laws. It says cursed is the ground because of you. The ground has been cursed because of the activity of sinful human beings. It's sinful human beings in their way they try to garner food from the ground that are going to result in many more weeds proliferating than otherwise would be the case if they were not sinners.
So you're saying that the problem here then in the curse is that we've already talked about man being put outside the garden. Now he has to toil and work on his own. But the curse that's happening here is not a change in the ground itself, but the ground is going to be much more difficult to bring about crops.
No,
is that
I
it?
would argue that the ground is changed, but it's changed because of the sin of the inhabitants that are cultivating that ground. It's we human beings that are cursing the ground, not to just our own detriment, but the detriment of all life. I mean, here you got Genesis 1 making a comment to human beings, a command to human beings, manage the planet for the benefit of all life. But now because of sin, we're going to be despoiling the ground to the detriment of all life.
You know, it's interesting. In Derek Kidner's commentary on Genesis 1, he points out that to understand this verse properly, you need to look at it in the context, as Hughes pointed out, of Genesis 1:28 and 29, where God commands Adam and Eve to have dominion over the earth and to subdue it. And we've already talked about how those words have very harsh and negative connotations. And the idea, though, is that at some point, Adam and Eve were going to leave the Garden of Eden and go out and subdue this planet where there already are thorns and thistles, but they are going to be able to subdue it in a pre-fallen state. But once they've fallen, and now they're incapable in a fallen state of subduing the earth, and so the ground is cursed and will remain in this harsh condition. The earth is unsubduable by fallen man. So I think if this is consistent from Derek Kidner's viewpoint to what Hugh's saying.
There, the clue, it takes us back to chapter 1 in the command to subdue the earth. Now they're in a situation where they're in an adversarial relationship with the ground and they are unable to subdue it.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a second phrase here too. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you'll eat of it all the days of your life. The painful toil here is contrasted with the fulfilling, joyful work that Adam was experiencing before the fall. I mean, he was working so that the land would produce of its produce for him to eat before the fall. But it wasn't a painful toil. It was an enjoyable work. Now that he is a sinner, the fulfilling work has been transformed into painful toil.
Now, could we, I'm just trying to still give a good connection for people who are listening to this tape and what we're talking about here. Would an example of what you're talking about here in our pollution of the ground be, for example, what we're doing to our planet now, that we're not managing it efficiently?
Well, through over-irrigation, we're making the soil more salty than it was in the past, and it's going to take more work for that ground to produce its food for us. Because years ago we were a little bit too greedy and hasty and trying to garner food from that ground. That's one example. You know, saying, hey, we got a few bugs in our land. We don't like bugs. The housewife doesn't like to see wormholes in the apples, etc. What we're going to do is blast our fruit with pesticides, but we overdo it. And therefore, we discover we got this pesticide runoff, which is killing all of our fish. So those are some good examples where, because of our sin and our greed, the ground is not producing like it's used to, and we see that we have the consequence of painful toil. Now we got to take this agricultural land that has become very salty, and we have to restore it. Well, what we discover is a lot harder to restore something that we've ruined than to take something that was virgin in the first place and do it right.